we started yet, or? Okay, I just saw this letter from Kelly, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I'm going to address that.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, watch out. It's 6:02, and I am calling the special meeting of the Millwood Planning Commission to order for Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. I'll start with attendance. Commissioner Ankney.
Present.
Commissioner Molitor.
Present.
Commissioner Wu.
Present.
Commissioner BC. Let the record show that Commissioner BC joined the meeting at 6:02. At this time, I will be looking for a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
I second that.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda.
Any discussion?
Any discussion? Thanks, Mike. Okay, Mike, now what do I say?
Take a vote.
Oh, all those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the April 27th, 2022 meeting. Do I have a motion on the minutes from our last meeting?
I'll move to approve those.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
No.
I looked them over. I thought they looked good.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Moving on to our action items for this evening. The first action item is appointment of a new Planning Commission chair. So I think that some of you were aware of this before tonight, and some of you found out just when you sat down at your seats that there was a letter from Mr. Stravens. At the City Council's May meeting, they voted to appoint Mr. Stravens to the vacancy left with the exit of Kate McLaughlin. And so he has moved on to the City Council. The way that the appointment occurred didn't give him a chance to be here to say his goodbyes or for us to thank him for his service. I'll address that a little bit later on in my staff report. But at this time, what we need to do is appoint a new planning commissioner to take over the chair position. And so at this time, I would be looking for any volunteers or nominations for somebody to take over that position as chair.
I would like to nominate Mike to take over. He has a lot of experience here, and I think he'd do a good job.
And
I feel
Mike,
very comfortable with that if Mike does.
I'd be honored with the nomination. Yeah, thank you.
So, Bobby, can you put that into a motion, and then we'll get a second and vote?
Sure. I move that we appoint or elect or whatever we do Mike as our new chairperson.
Is there a second?
I will second that
All
as
those.
well.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Great.
Well, that was easy. Good job, Mike.
So with that, I'm going
Way to go,
to
Bobby.
hand the meeting over to Mr. Ankney, and then going forward, you'll be seated here because this mic is the control mic. So.
Same power already.
Got the mic.
That's a good call.
Perfect. How come my mic won't turn on?
That's a good question. Well, let me turn mine off. Now try it.
Oh, one at a time. That's why that mic's the control mic.
So yes, we can only have 3 mics on at a time.
Okay.
That mic, you can shut everyone down, so.
Oh. Okay, so I should turn mine off.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you, everybody. I'm honored. All right, so that brings us to action item 5B, findings of Title 17 of the developmental regulations. I looked them over. I thought everything that was done on that was what we had talked about. And so I guess at this point in time, if there's that's an action item that we need to vote and to approve. So I would entertain a motion to approve that.
I found a few things that didn't get changed or should
Okay,
get
so-
changed. We were,
Point of order. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. If somebody seconds it, then we open it up to discussion.
did anybody move?
Nobody moved it, so I'm looking for either a second or a not.
You moved it? You moved to approve them?
I moved that
I missed
for approval.
that. Okay.
Yeah. So if somebody will second it, if nobody will second it, then we'll pull back out. Okay, so I'll remove the motion and open it up for discussion. Bobby?
I have quite a few, we discussed at the last one that Christina was going to go through and make the changes, but we were going to go through it this time and get nothing of substance, but any kind of little detail, kind of grammar sort of things. And I did find a fair number of those. Just little things.
So that is not my recollection of our discussion. My recollection was that we were moving it forward, that it's never going to be perfect. And so that was my understanding of our discussion last time.
That's definitely not what I remember. I remember you saying you were going to try to get it to us, and for especially me to go through it and find these things to get it as good as possible.
Yes,
It
and
will not be perfect, I agree, it can't be.
And I understand that we're already past our deadline for moving this forward. And so, obviously, Commissioner Ankeny, this is your meeting. But I will tell you that I will not be bringing it back to this commission. So if findings are not approved tonight, then it will go forward to the city council without any findings.
Thank you for that.
I don't think that's the question. I think it's just let's pick up these few little errors and,
Bobby, I have to agree with Christina on this, but what I'm going to give you the opportunity to do, can you give us an example? I mean, if we're talking about a comma or a period or a capitalization, something like that, minor, I mean, I'm not too concerned about that, but if there's a language thing or something like that, if you've got something in particular you could point out, I'd appreciate it.
and this is one we did discuss, it just didn't get changed. And 17.40.020 in the sign regulations.
What
Can you give us a
page?
page?
What page?
45.
Page 45.
Which page 45?
The bottom right
Bottom
hand,
45.
the
Oh,
dark
okay.
colored one.
Thank you, Jay.
Yes, really.
Yeah.
Under J, illuminated signs will be allowed in areas zoned commercial or public reserve. We talked about adding industrial to that, and I think it's kind of important. We agreed to add industrial to that, and I think it's really important that we have industrial in there, or we've got a lot of signs that,
Okay. Tell me that code reference again. I'm looking at a different document than you are. I'm just looking at the code.
17.40.020 sign requirements, page 45, and,
Page 36 of 67.
yes,
Thank you. That's what I needed.
okay.
okay.
So adding light industrial to that?
Yeah, I think that's important, because we have a lot of signs in industrial that are lit.
Okay.
And another example of formatting is page 20 of 67. The way this is formatted with the A, establishments licensed to serve alcohol, and then residential uses, outdoor business activities, and conversion of residential structures are all underneath establishments licensed to serve alcohol.
So I will change this, but the formatting issues will be taken care of by the codifiers. So,
Okay.
Well, they need to know what we had in mind, though, and so it, you know.
And I understand alignment issues and stuff like that. You're working between documents.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, okay. Anything else that you would consider major?
On 6 of 67, there, under animals, occupant or resident may keep or maintain, you have an opening parentheses, but there's no closed parentheses, so it sounds like animals may be slaughtered on such premises as follows. And then you talk about household pets, so it just needs a closed parentheses, so.
where
we
is
know
that again? Oh, I see.
May be slaughtered on such premises, closed parentheses.
I don't think that was supposed to be a parentheses there.
Well, you've got one at the beginning and it never closes.
I know I'm saying I don't think the one at the beginning was meant to be there.
I think it's a good idea for it to be there,
So where do you want it closed at?
after premises.
Okay, where's the open?
The open one is provided that in the second line.
Oh, okay, yep, I'm with you. Okay,
Then, I thought, and maybe somebody else would remember, that we talked about residential uses in the C1 zone as that we were going to change it to allow the back part of a building to be used for residents, not just the second floor, that we were going to make it match C2. It's not a big deal to me, I just thought I remembered we agreed to that.
I remember we discussed it. I cannot remember.
I went back and listened to the meeting, listening to that section more than once, because it was confusing the way that the conversation rolled out, and due to the fact that the microphone usage was spotty at best. And what I understood from the final vote was that it would be allowed only on the top, in what Commissioner Stravens described as typical mixed use, I think is what he called it. So I did listen to that one a number of times. It wasn't real clear.
Yeah, like I say, it's not a big deal to me either way, just what I thought I remembered.
Sure.
This one's kind of big. Page 23 of 67 in the table.
Okay?
Under I2, building height, 45 feet, this shall not exceed 4 stories in height is not in the current code. That's just kind of made up or added. I think that our consultant she kind of changed some of these tables, and I think that's where that came from.
Well, I remember discussing this at length.
I do too.
I mean, it makes sense.
Because I remembered, I actually made a comment, 45 feet. Okay, well, if I put 3-foot tall stories, I could have 15 stories in it. Remember making some kind of smart aleck comment like that?
Right, and that's true on,
I know that we talked about that.
that would matter in commercial or in
Right.
I-1, but in I-2, if you've got a paper-making machine, how do you tell stories?
So 1722.020 is on your screen right now. This is from our existing code. No building shall exceed a height limit of 45 feet, provided, however, that when the building or portion of a building is located within 100 feet of a residential zone with no intervening street or alley, the permissible numbers of stories and the maximum height of the building shall not exceed that allowed in the adjacent residential zones. Buildings in excess of 45 feet up to a maximum of 85 feet may be allowed by conditional use permit.
Okay, so does it say anything about numbers of stories with the 45 feet? I don't see anything that talks about stories there.
Well, this does.
I know this
Unless I
does, but I
understand.
don't think it should, because
Okay.
we just kind of made that up. And like I say, if you're an industrial thing like the paper mill, I'm not sure how stories apply.
Well,
Would it be or?
but that would be so the way I interpret this from reading this is, okay, your building height is top out max 45 feet, okay? But if you're running 8-foot stories, or 10-foot stories, okay, sections with 10 feet, you can only have four stories, so their building height would be 40 feet.
Right,
Okay, but you can't exceed 45 feet total.
true, but in our current code now, it does not say anything about stories in the I-2 zone,
Okay?
and I'm not sure we should add it.
Why wouldn't we want to add it,
Right.
Bobby?
Because the paper mill has different sorts of requirements for their buildings, and they might not have stories in the same way that an office building or a house or something or other would have. I think it was originally written to give them the maximum flexibility within certain limits. Okay, you can't have it any higher than this unless you come get a conditional use permit. But we have not dictated how to count stories or how many stories and this kind of would be a last minute, let's throw in a new regulation on the paper mill kind of thing that makes me nervous.
Well, I think this is better defined.
It is?
And that if the paper mill has a need, that a conditional use permit would certainly be entertained by Christina and, our government. So I think this is a little more defined, better defined than what we had before.
It is better defined, it's also more restrictive without, and it's kind of been thrown in at the last minute, because this is the first time that it has really shown up as kind of the final thing, and that makes me
Well, I
pretty
didn't make any
nervous.
changes to that between our last meeting and now.
You made some other changes in this, and this was one of the ones you were going to change and didn't. In fact, you talked about leaving the I-2 column out entirely, was the last I heard.
No. I went back and listened to the meeting.
Well, maybe it was the previous meeting, I don't know. This has been an issue from the beginning because our consultant put into I-2 the information either from I-1 or from PR2. She got mixed up and it was all confused and mixed up. And I hate to be changing, making things more restrictive for the paper mill because we have a consultant that misunderstood or got confused, and it just ended up staying.
Commissioner Wu, do you have any thoughts on this?
Would it change anything for the paper mill right now? Would we be going in and saying all of a sudden you can't have more than 4 stories?
It might change something for the next, I mean, we always grandfather things in, so anything that's there is fine. But for the next thing that they have to do to improve or to stay viable or whatever, it conceivably could.
I think it would get really complicated and we would start needing to define stories if we wanted to do that. What's technically a story? A level that goes all the way across a building or a section?
I don't know the definition of what a story is, but, I mean, footnote number 2 says building height can be 85 feet with a CUP. So,
Right. And I don't see how you do a lot of work in less than 10 foot anyway. You wouldn't be able to get more than 4 real stories in a building.
right.
So it makes sense to me to leave it that way.
It makes sense to me the way it's written here.
So we are consciously deciding to add this requirement on I-2. Is that correct?
If you want to word it that way, then I'm going to say we are consciously adding this to the.
Okay.
And I agree, and I think that building height 85 feet with a conditional use permit gives us flexibility if something is needed.
I agree. Okay, next.
There's some of the references are wrong, because I think things got renumbered in the 17.22.0 section.
What did they do that?
So it shows up several times, but the next one is 25 of 67.
Are you talking about off-street parking, fencing and screening and outdoor lighting?
Yes,
Okay.
those
That's
have
something else
changed.
that we talked about on numerous occasions, and, you know, with the reference back to,
Correct.
I think that covers it. I mean,
That,
I know we,
that's not
I
the
think
issue.
I made some other changes that might have changed what those references.
So the
say.
off-street parking one now refers to fencing, for instance, and the fencing refers to storage.
okay.
So those need to be corrected on,
Okay, I'm highlighting those as something to go back and correct.
so.
I don't know that you want to be waiting now
No.
for me to do that.
No, but every time do a search on it. So
Okay.
that you get all of them, because it was several of them.
Okay.
And under antenna, I thought we were going to get rid of the width. Page, back in the definitions, page 78.
Oh, I don't have
Did you question, Bobby? I'm looking at that.
For-
Again, I know that we discussed that.
It says omnidirectional antenna, also known as a whip antenna, but there are a lot of omnidirectional antennas that are not whip antennas.
So you're just saying take out also known as a whip,
Yeah,
just leave it directional antenna.
yeah, I thought we'd agree to that. It's a little like saying personal passenger vehicles, also known as SUVs. It's true, but it's not.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think those are the ones of real substance, the others, well, actually, there, if I can find it, there is one that is a little weird because there is no It's one of the ones where there's no verb, so it makes it sound, remember if it was animals, sound like you have to have animals, or you have to. Yeah, I think it was.
Page 6 of 67.
So it'd have to be UR2, UR1 or UR2, maybe UR2. Yes, UR3 actually,
What page is that?
page 8 of 67. Most of these were fixed, but this one was missed.
And
So because there's no verbs in here, you have, in the UR3 zone, animal requirements are as follows: household pets as defined, and keeping, maintaining, and raising of exotic animals as defined. But it doesn't say which ones you can have and which ones you can't. They're just listed. So I think the first one needs to say are allowed, and the second one needs to say is not allowed or is not permitted.
Okay.
And then the same thing in UR2, up on the same page under B. Keeping of up to 4 female fowls or rabbits is allowed. And I'm a little uncomfortable every time this "with addition of non-human primates" comes. After is not allowed with the addition. Yeah, I feel like it should go in front of is not allowed.
Okay, I'll go back and make that change. In all of them.
okay.
And I think that those are the ones of substance.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is, Bobby, I know we got this packet late last night, and I appreciate the time and the effort that you put into this today, to go through that. Christina, do you see anything there that's too much work?
No, not at all.
Okay, so in that case, would everybody be okay if we made, because we need to get this moved on.
Yep.
Okay, we've been working on it for a long time. We need to get this moved on. Christina's already said that she doesn't want to bring this back to us. I would entertain a motion to approve with the edits that were pointed out tonight, and be able to move this on to the city council.
I will make that motion to approve the changes that have been discussed, that Christina's going to make, and that we advance it to the city council.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second that motion.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Does that include the findings, or are we just discussing this?
Yes, that includes the findings.
Okay.
Everything. So I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. Motion to approve. I'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for the hard work. Some of us has been on that for forever. And for Commissioner Wu to step into this, knowing what we went through, it's yeoman's work. Okay, well, that brings us to agenda item number 6, discussion on the park master plan, and we've got a presentation from Ken Boris from SPV Landscape Architects.
So I'm actually going to start tonight, and then we'll hand it over to Ken.
Okay,
Because I want to do a little preliminary groundwork
perfect. Cool.
before we
okay, the floor is yours.
throw him to the wolves, as it were. So as you all know, this commission has been tasked with heading up the process for a new park master plan for our city park. this isn't typically a planning commission item. This isn't something that normally a planning commission would be tasked with, but this was assigned to the planning commission at the request of Mr. Stravens, who felt like after the years we've put in mired in code language and updates to the comp plan and shoreline, that we needed to do something that was a little bit easier and not quite as arduous. So I have spent considerable time speaking with the mayor, meeting with our consultant Ken, who you'll be introduced to here in a bit, with Mr. Worst, the city's legal counsel, and we've worked out a plan going forward. So I'm just going to run through a few simple slides talking about the purpose of this, what we're going to be doing, what we're not going to be doing, and then I will hand it over to Ken to introduce himself and what he does and how he'll be working with us. So when we talk about the park master plan and any improvements made to the park, it's going to happen in 3 stages. So the first is going to be what we are doing here with the commission, which is the development of a park master plan. The second stage will be looking for funding opportunities, just like we do with roads or anything else. This isn't something that the city necessarily just writes a check for. There is grant funding available, but largely you're only eligible if you have an actual plan in place. So in order to get funds to make improvements, we first need to have a plan. And then the third stage, of course, would be the actual construction. Very likely that construction wouldn't take place all in one swoop, that this will be something that's implemented over time. But that's how it would, the funding opportunities and the construction would kind of go hand in hand. So I just want to talk a little bit about why we are developing a park master plan, aside from, again, making us eligible for funding. So I know that most of you are familiar with the park, very familiar, I should say. I know, based on my years growing up here at City Hall when my mom was here, and then also from conversations that I've had with our Public Works Department and the mayor, that there's never really been a cohesive plan for the park. It's just sort of been, when money arose, we kind of plopped something in where we thought it would fit. And so there's nothing wrong with the park. Obviously, we get lots of use out of it, but what we're looking for is maybe something that's a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more strategically planned out and laid out. One of the things that I think is important for us to consider as we go through this is the needs of park users today, and those have changed quite a bit over the years. I think when we get to some aerial photos, you'll see that at the east end of the park, there used to be a couple of baseball fields or softball fields. In recent years, that has declined as a use. That field has now been repurposed to accommodate things like lacrosse and soccer, which are more popular. Right now, we have the addition of the farmers market in the park, which is a use that we've never had before. Some of you may know that yearly multiple classes, graduating classes of West Valley High School hold at least part of their reunions in our park. So we have some churches that come and meet there. So I just think over time, the people who use the park, the needs have changed a little bit, and that should be looked at.
Don't forget the car shows.
Car shows, yes. Car shows are a hot button topic that we can delve into if you want as we go through the process. The next big thing is to update equipment out there that's outdated or failing. So there's a lot of things that go into this, because what you and I think is failing might not be what everyone else thinks is failing. I will tell you this. When we look at a piece of play equipment, largely what's driving even the review of that is our insurance carrier, who is here yearly and walks the parks and other city facilities. So I'll just give you an idea. The merry-go-round is a real problem for our insurance company. getting rid of it is a real problem for me. I am emotionally attached. I played on the merry-go-round as a child. But it really just is what it is. The standard for play equipment now is much different than it was when much of our equipment was installed. And so we need to be changing with the times. I was informed week before last that the tennis courts have outlived their usefulness. And so my plan had been through these discussions and through my discussions with Ken was that the tennis courts were going to be one of the fixed items that was going to stay right where it was. With this new information from Public Works, the tennis courts are now not a fixed item. I'll get into this more. We do want to have the courts, but we're not married to their current location. I want to touch on one other thing that I know is real hot button is the wading pool. I don't want to debate the wading pool. The directive that we have as a commission is that the pool as it is right now is going away. It's a priority of the mayor to have a wading pool because he feels, and I agree, that that is something that's quintessentially Millwood. We're the only ones with a wading pool, and it's an important aspect of our park. So for the purposes of this commission's work, we will be replacing the wading pool. Discussions about the current pool and whether or not it should be removed should be addressed to the mayor, if you want to do that. Another big ticket item along with our insurance liabilities is meeting the ADA requirements. Currently, the swimming pool and that I know of, currently the swimming pool and the play area are not ADA accessible. In both cases, they're surrounded by a fairly substantial concrete curbing. And then with the play area, the pea gravel is not accessible for wheelchairs and things of that nature. So part of this, and where we're really going to lean on Ken, is with his experience with the materials necessary to make things ADA accessible and protect the city that way. And then lastly, of course, the funding eligibility. We have to have the plan in place to apply for grant funds. So this commission's responsibilities, as always, is to receive public input. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. To analyze the input that we get, to work with the consultant to draft a final draft plan that will then be forwarded on to the City Council with your recommendation. So this is an aerial photo. Again, it's kind of dated here a little bit because you can see in that one corner we still have a what the remnants, I guess, of a ball field. But these are the items that currently are sort of the bigger ticket items in the park. So over right next to the fire station, number one is the new park well. And I want to take a moment right here just to say, along with the consultant and me and the commission, we're also going to be having Daniel Hecox, who works in our Public Works Department, working with us. And I'm going to speak a little bit more to that in a bit, but I'm bringing that up now because I'm going to reference these boards. One of these boards showed a new city Christmas tree being planted very near this well. And Daniel looked at it and said, well, you can't do that. So there is a need for us to have someone who understands that sort of thing. So you will be seeing Daniel in and out throughout the process as we go along. So again, number one is the new park well. Number two, the playground. You can see there, one of the things that I've learned as I've visited with Ken a few times is you can see, looking at that, there's quite a bit of open unused space, for lack of a better word, based on the requirements for that older play equipment and how far you have to have cleared for those swings and things of that nature. So with his expertise, we can do maybe some better space planning and get back some of that area or put it to a better use. 4 is the existing pool, 5 are the restrooms, 6 is that existing splash pad. This is a perfect example of what I was just describing. A former mayor decided that she wanted to have a splash pad, and she tasked Cleveland Paul with doing it. Cleveland Paul never did do aquatic installation or planning. So it was just kind of plopped down where plumbing was available. It's not in a great location. It's antiquated equipment. Both the splash pad and the pool have no recirculation of water or any of that. It just comes out and is gone. And so, technology being what it is, I think we can do better. 8, of course, is the very popular tennis courts. 7 is those 2 half basketball courts. I'm missing, 3, I didn't talk about 3 is that small round picnic shelter, and then 9 is that large, more contemporary picnic shelter, and then 10, of course, the play field that's now been redesigned for soccer and lacrosse. So this is what we have on the ground right now. So in my discussions with the mayor, he has identified the following things that need to be in whatever plan we develop. We need to keep that open play field. It's a popular amenity. We get lots of lacrosse on that field. Lacrosse is something that's gaining in popularity. There really isn't much in the way of lacrosse fields out in the valley, so we are seeing good use of that field for that, and as well for soccer. We need to keep the kids' playground in some iteration. We need to have what the mayor is terming like an event plaza area. Would be somewhere probably paved or with pavers that would also have electricity available, water available, a place where things like the farmer's market or any other sort of gathering can take place. We need to keep the sport courts, and by that I mean the tennis or pickleball. Ken can speak to this as well. Pickleball is just on fire. And so I think we need to look at that. I am sad to say that Lisa fields a number of calls each summer from adults fighting over the courts and whether it's tennis or pickleball and whose turn it is. So we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. And then, of course, the wading pool and an associated splash pad or water feature. Couple other things that we should keep in mind as we go through. As you all are all aware, there is a proposed widening of Argonne, which is going to take out the tree that's currently used at IEP for the city's Christmas celebration. So in our plan, we need to account for a tree that can be used for that going forward once the IEP property is no longer an option. One of the things that came up during our meetings in the park last year when you guys were taking comments was the possibility of maybe a theme for the park equipment. That's not a must-have, but I think that there are some very innovative ways that they are doing that, and we do have some very specific things here in Millwood with the paper mill or our historic district. Just something to keep in mind as we move forward. How does our park interact with the Millwood Trail? We'll come to another aerial photo here again in a minute, and I know that you all know, but there's multiple access points from the trail to the park, and is there something special or some way that we can integrate those more to work together or something of that nature? Just keep that in mind while we're talking. What makes our park unique, I think, first and foremost is that wading pool. So we need to keep that in the forefront of our mind. And then also when we're talking about the equipment and what stays and what goes and what can come in, always keeping in mind that ultimately, really, it's the responsibility of the mayor and the council to really take into consideration what our insurance carriers think about what we're doing. So some pitfalls to avoid, these are just things that I have thought of that I could see being a problem, and I want to make you aware of them early, and I'll remind you of them often. So the first one is we can't stray from our directive. So we can't talk about how this park is going to possibly tie into another park and how property we own over there might work. We are looking at this 5 acres, and that's it, along with the tie-in to the trail. But we need to stay on task and not get too far into the weeds there. I don't want you to consider dollars while doing this plan. One of the conversations that I've had with Daniel is that, you know, he says, well, I want to be in the meetings because I want to talk about where our utilities are and where our sprinkler lines are. We're not thinking about that. I don't know how many of you have ever, maybe not many, but are familiar with SimCity. You're given a blank piece of ground and you build it from the ground up. That's what we're doing here. Like a lot of what we do on this commission, this is, you know, what we want to see. So, and we're not saying that it's going to happen all at once. We're not saying that the city is going to pay for it. But things like moving of utilities and water lines and things of that nature, they can be built into the construction through funding. If we need to make some changes, we can. So I don't want this to be a penny pinching sort of exercise. Let's make a park plan for the park that we think is best for the citizens of Millwood, and then we'll figure out how to execute that at another time. I don't want us to duplicate the efforts of other jurisdictions. So other jurisdictions obviously are going to have swings and merry-go-rounds and water features and that sort of thing. But what I want to steer us away from specifically would be an example, sand volleyball. Spokane Valley has got sand volleyball market cornered. They've got a great facility. We can't obviously provide every single amenity that folks want in our park. We've got 5 acres. So I think we need to look at what we do and do it well, and not try and throw in a random sand volleyball court that becomes the neighborhood litter box. And then trees always come up, obviously, in Millwood. So again, think of it as starting with a blank slate. We will work to incorporate whatever trees are existing that we can, as well as we will plant as many trees as necessary on the back end. The Beautification and Tree Board is getting ready to kick off a brand new inventory of trees. They've received grant funding. They're getting a consultant. There'll be GIS. And so it may end up that through their study of our trees need to be removed or not. But rest assured that if trees need to be removed, we'll come in on the back end and replace them. The mayor has committed to, I don't know if any of you were at the Arbor Day celebration, but replacing trees with a larger caliper, because apparently they, and you seem like you maybe know about this, they planted some on Dalton years ago that were like this, and now 20 years later they're like this. So, so he has been very vocal about feeling like we need to invest in some larger caliper trees to give them a head start as we replace. So here is what I believe are the fixed things that shouldn't move, with one exception. And I have fixed that number 10, I don't know how many times, and it will not fix over there. So obviously the new park well, we're not going to pick that up and move that anywhere. The restrooms will stay where they are. The large picnic structure is a question mark. That's a fairly new structure, newish. It is a little bit more contemporary looking, a little bit more high-end looking than the other picnic structure. If our plan demands that it move, we can, but unless we have a really good compelling reason, I don't see why we would do that. And what I would advocate for is maybe any new structures that we put in would more closely match this one than the other one does right now. And then, of course, that play field, we want to keep that open. So talking about the public input, that's kind of your biggest task. I think most of you know and will agree with me that the typical way of gathering public input is just really not very effective in my mind. People don't come out unless they're mad. And regardless of how much I advertise and ask, it's really hard to get people to come into public meetings, specifically in the chambers. And so what I have found to be very useful is to have booths out in the farmers market. I think this is really beneficial for a couple of reasons. First of all, you get a lot of traffic, but importantly, in this instance, you're getting traffic of the people who are using the park. So when they walk up to the booth and they see that we're talking about the park plan, they're actually standing in the park and can really get a good visual and a good feel. You get a lot of farmers market traffic from the playground and the parents that are there with their kids, so I think we'll get a good variety of folks who stop and talk to us. Having said that, I also feel like you all can sit here and listen to me drone on about what information I receive at these events, but I think that it's more effective for you to actually be there with me talking to even if you're not talking yourselves, listening to the comments that are being made, hearing what people have to say. I've spoken with Brian a lot about this in light of the new Public Meetings Act and the rules changing. One thing I am sad to say is that based on those, we will not be able to have meeting in the park like we did last year. The need to broadcast it is just too convoluted for me to feel comfortable hauling a camera and Wi-Fi and all of that. However, I spoke with him about this idea and he went back and read, and what it says is meetings where action is to be taken. So here is what I am proposing for the dates that are on your screen. I have ordered a double-sized 10 by 20 tent that we will have along with tables. I have Millwood swag that often draws people in, sunglasses, things of that nature. We'll have boards. Now these are old and I'm going to speak to those in a moment. We will get some new designs from Ken that we will have in the booth with us. And basically what we'll do is we'll just allow people to come to the booth and we'll just tell them what we're doing, ask them what they think, and then we'll bring that information back, cull it all together, kind of go from there at the end of the summer. I will also be having that same setup at Millwood Days, which is at the end of August. Now I'm going to touch real quickly on these. In 2018 at Millwood Days, I took these two boards that had been drawn up by a different firm based on what the mayor had suggested, and we got really good participation at our booth and really good feedback. 4 years on, the way that the feedback has been put together and memorialized, some of it's a little hard to decipher. Under dislikes, it says no volleyball. I don't know if that means no, we don't want volleyball, or we're disappointed there was no volleyball. So we'll need, live and learn, live and learn. But I've spoken with Ken about some actual hands-on activities that we can have in the booth. Maybe just a big green square with a wading pool to scale and let people move things around and see how things fit. My experience is when you allow people to get their hands on something, you get a better conversation going. So my plan right now would be that we would hold special meetings at the farmers market on these 3 Wednesdays throughout the summer. The farmers market starts at 3. I'm fine to be there at 3 if others who have jobs can't be there till after 5. I would obviously be there for the duration, but my My intent would be for the four of you and possibly a fifth to be there with me. That would be our meeting. We will need to limit our conversations to just about the park plan. So if someone comes up and wants to jaw to you about some other issue, we'd kind of have to, set that aside. Right, Mike will have his gavel and he'll gavel them down. But, just simply be conversations, no action being taken, no decisions, no discussion amongst the group about any decision-making. I do have the feedback that we got on these boards, so we can reference that as well. And then at Millwood Days, as we get closer to that, we can talk about whether or not I can get any of you to help me out on that day. In all of these instances, with the exception of the June 22nd Farmers Market, I will also be helping with a historic preservation booth at the same time. So I'll kind of be going back and forth, but they're pretty autonomous. They know what they're doing. So that's a lot of information, I know. Do you have any questions for me before I hand it over to Ken?
I've got a couple.
Okay.
So would the June 22nd and the August 24th meetings be in place of our regular scheduled meetings? Because those are not the last Wednesdays of the month.
Well, there'll be special meetings no matter what, because the only time it's not a special meeting is when it's Wednesday at 6.
Okay.
So if we notice it, even Wednesday at, 5:30, it's a special meeting.
Okay, so my question is, okay, so we're going to do this on June 22nd, then we would still have our normal meeting on June 29th.
That will be up to you.
Okay.
I don't see a reason for it. I don't have anything on your docket other than this. And since we won't be talking about the information that we receive until we're completely done receiving it, I don't know that it makes any sense to have another meeting unless you want to meet and take me out to dinner.
That's what I'm getting at, is,
Okay.
it's summertime.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say that these would be in place of your
Okay,
meetings.
perfect. Thank you. That's
Any
the only
other
question I had.
questions?
Is this all?
Get to work, Jay. Listen, we haven't even heard from Ken yet. Okay, so I am just gonna get out of this. Ken has a little, let's see. Ken, if you just want to tell me when you want me to scroll. Yep.
So we're all live and everybody can hear us. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for entrusting us with this park, and compliments to you, Christina, because you've done a lot of work and that is invaluable when it comes to park plans. I want to just give you a little bit of brief history about myself and SPVV, Landscape Architects, and then going to talk a little bit about the plans that we already have, the information we have. And then I just want to give you a little update on some of the funding opportunities that we can kind of look forward to. So it touches in a lot of the items that she really put the broad stroke over, but that will kind of give you an understanding of the different things. Me as a personal, grew up south of Spokane. I'm a Spokane, resident, been here pretty much my entire life. Graduated WSU, moved to Spokane, became a landscape architect, and have been practicing for 27 years with my colleagues. So we've done a lot of parks. We've done a lot of work in municipalities very similar to yours. We've actually worked in Millwood in the past, but we've done a lot of work for the City of Spokane Valley, Liberty Lake, and you'll see that in these pictures. Probably recognize some of these locations with Centennial Trail, just a number of different projects in the landscape architectural world, we'll say. Proud to say that I also served on the City of Spokane's Park Board, so I think I have a good feeling of where you guys are at in your sitting. So first of all, I want to thank you. It's a thankless job to do these jobs, and the level of detail is I know it seems kind of minutia, but it really is important for those that use those documents. It's awesome. So getting that down and knowing what you want, that's what it means. Park plans are dynamic. It's really important that you understand when we're talking about a master plan, it really is a living document. This thing is going to change. It's going to evolve. It's going to ebb and flow. But the goal here is to just have a pathway that we're going to follow. And in my mind, it's a value of you and your community. So I'm not going to prepare a plan to you that's going to force, this is what I think is, this is what's got to be because it's really good. This is about you and your community and what you want from your park. So understanding the user's needs, understanding the park and how it's used today, and then recognizing the historical context is really important. But we also have to recognize that these parks have to adjust and flow with time and with regulations, and I hate to say it, risk management. We don't want to pigeonhole ourselves in and just go down that one path, one or the other, because, again, this is about our family, our futures, and what we're leaving as a legacy. So if you kind of look at that and understand and think about these master plans, it is good to start at 30,000 feet. Throw all the pieces out on the table, figure out which ones are important, prioritize them, and then we focus in on that, and then we start looking at how we can fund that and bring it to fruition. It will change. I guarantee it. Even if we get done in 4 years, it's changed already. So understanding what those dynamics are is good, and just trying to project in that crystal ball is really important. And you as the commissioner, that's kind of your job, it's your role. So I commend you for it. It's a fun process. It has its ups and downs. So with that, if you want to go to the next one, I just want to touch on the kind of the planning process. I think what Christina has laid out, quite honestly, is a very good, it's a very good plan and process. And quite frankly, it's what a lot of park planning communities don't do, and they get themselves in a little bit in some of those tough spots. At the same time, they don't find the funding to do it. To have someone within your organization looking forward to that and thinking about this planning process is good. So I take my hat off to you because you've done a nice job of laying out a path forward so that we can gather the information and use it strategically to assess what the values are that your community holds and they want to have in this park. So I just wanted to briefly show this slide because there's two of them. Park plans were done in 2014. Not sure how much input you had. You took them, you got some good input back, and then when you overlay them, you kind of start to see the green and the red, and you see the differences between them. And there's a lot of similarities. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's changed since 2018, but these are some of the opportunities that we want to look at and make sure we're maximizing. So you can kind of, if you start with, some of the real basics, the open field, the bathroom stays, and then work your way into it, you're going to see that there's a plan that will kind of evolve out of this. But this is just kind of a snapshot of how we might want to keep comparing. The only downside on this is what we don't know is, was it set specific to some parameters? In other words, is it to scale, is it proportional, are the sizes fit? It's such a high level, we're not sure, but I think it's a good starting point. And Christine and I are working on that next phase, and that is, we got to get a survey to know exactly where some things are, those that we're going to keep. Example, the well, the bathhouse, the trees, maybe, based on an assessment. And those kinds of things, then we work around it and move things around. But again, it's a very good starting point. So I do not believe you're starting at zero. You're starting, somewhere in the 20-mile-an-hour range, all right? This is a good thing. So I take my hat off to you and the other consultants that worked on this, because there's some thought into this. So when we think of that, again, I'll try to keep this short, but we also need to think of the funding opportunities. And as Christina mentioned, each one of the funding opportunities, depending on how you're going to do this, generally, we always see them phased. We always see parts and pieces. I have yet to see a park built from 0 to 100. Even the last one that really, Riverfront Park, you're probably all familiar with it. It's done in like 6 phases. They still didn't have the original amount of money that they thought they would need. And so the good news is it's got opportunities to be added onto as funding arises. Liberty Lake has a nice orchard park. That's the one in the upper right corner. Huge splash pad. Again, some of it was built, the majority of the bones were built in one phase, but it still has a lot more to go and literally grow in. And I will bet you that's 5, 6 years old now. It's probably dynamics have changed all the houses have built around it, so it's kind of interesting to see where that's going. But again, we started with a master plan and worked our way into what was priority, and then developed the park based on that priority with some room to grow. So thinking about those and those changes that might happen is a good thing. Also, just wanted to show a little bit about some of the, you talked about a theme and recognizing, I think you already said, we've got a nice picnic shelter and it's got a certain style to it. The trail's got a certain style to it. Tying those together at the bathhouse or the bathroom might have a certain character. We need to look at that. It may be important to some and not so important to others, but we want to gather that information, let you decide, see it, hear from the people, let you decide what's important, and then we focus in our energies into those pieces. On the right side is kind of an organizational chart. You're the city of Millwood. This is, again, just taken from another quick project, so we just want to show you, but the city is in charge. We have the team pulling, off to the side, but then you get feedback from everyone, and the process is this, just this combination of gathering information and reassembling it and developing the park plan. So if I do want to touch on the funding opportunities, and it's really important that you kind of understand how you folks want to do it, and really at the end of the day, it's going to be up to city council. You're going to make your recommendations to them, and then they're going to decide if we're going to go out for a bond. Typical traditional fundings would be a bond. Other ones would be to take capital and invest every year, putting it into capital improvements where they do some assessments. That's kind of the traditional park funding. Then there's the, what I call the NGO, non-government offices kind of campaign, where you would go out and you would solicit funding from different sources. And I listed, for example, the Parks Foundation. So right now, the Parks Foundation of Spokane County, they go out and pay for some things. Most of those will pay for a little piece. My experience is you have a base, you get somebody that's invested in a major piece of it, and then those others will fall in to add on top of it. And so we list those just as a piece, because what you'll see under that side of it is they don't want to build your park or pay for your park. They want to help you get to your goal. So RCO is a good example. That's probably the biggest one that Spokane County uses. I don't know if you're familiar with the Recreation and Conservation Office. It's a process. It's a competitive process that you go for funding. But again, they want you to match a certain amount of money. So your pot is, $500,000, and they'll say, great, this is a big need. We got a lot of users. We're going to give you another $500,000 to reach that goal. But they're not going to give you the overall piece. The next one is just general donations. We've seen parks anywhere from, I think Kaiser actually is doing some of the river trail improvements right out here, I'm trying to think, right out here, Boulder Beach. Part of those, or some of those, are driven by they have a requirement to the the environment in the community, so they give some money to it. I could see where soccer field in there, ironically, so that was kind of an interesting thing. But that was a relationship that those kinds of are a part of that thing. So you need to have the plan in place so that you can show people what you're wanting to do, and then start the question and ask. And then the third one, then the fourth one, if you want to go down this road, is naming opportunities. So one of those, an example of that, Riverfront Park, they've renamed a lot of the facilities there to pay for some of the funding. So it's not the ice rink now, it's the Numerica Credit Union, for example, and they pay some funding to have that naming rights. And so those are, a lot of times that's just operational, but it can be used for, building and or construction as well. So that's one part of it. Again, that's really a step in getting the big picture, making some of the investment, and having them, those types of organizations add to it and build the overall, and build to the master plan. And then the third one is just grants and other endowments. And there are, and I don't know if anybody's interested, but there are definitely grants. When I think of those are like Hoop Fest does a grant program where they'll come in and pay for a basketball court within that. Not sure if they're still doing it, but there are a lot of organizations kind of like that. I know I was just listening to, I think it was one of the healthcare companies is saying they want to help promote, might be pickleball, and so healthy living. They will do some of those things. It's what's finding those grants. And then, of course, an endowment is pretty obvious. If there's someone that feels near and dear to them, that park is important to them, and they make a contribution or something like that, putting that in towards this and knowing that's going to go to pay for the benches, the tiles, all those elements is really important. And part of the master plan, big picture, is to do that, is to gather a plan that says this is what our community wants, and then this is how we're going to kind of pay for it together in an organized manner. Now, they do come in phases, as I have said before, and I think everybody's familiar with that. It's just got to figure out what that phase is, because the last thing we want to do is develop a plan, take it to construction, get the funding, and then paint ourselves into a corner and go, gosh, we should have thought about that before we put that structure in. It should have been sited over here because we had to have a whatever utility or something, access. So it's really important to think about those. So with that, I'd like to open it up, to some questions, if you have any. And this is just a beginning process. I think, as Christina has said, would like to take the documents that we already have. We've kind of put that on. We'll get some feedback, and then we'll present that to you on what we heard at one of those meetings that we can then present to the public as this moving target. And we also, I was telling her, when we start talking about playgrounds, there's one thing to see an image of the playgrounds, but we can bring resilient surfacing, we can bring some things that people can feel and see what that is. And so how does that work? How does that bring us up into be compliant? Because as you said, the nice thing, this is a well-used, loved park. That's the way I look at it. When they're used, they're well-loved. But we've got to be bringing it up to today's world, and we can't exclude anyone. And most of the funding sources basically require you to meet that minimum, the ADA requirements, and we just got a lot of deficiencies out there, particularly with the playground and the splash pad, and that's where it's really important. There are some really fun splash pads and opportunities. I was doing some more research where there's this wading pool associated with it, so that's kind of cool. But then we got to ask ourselves a little bit about those components, because there's usually a lifeguard. Anytime there's standing water, there's a lifeguard associated, which means there's programming. And so we want to understand, as we set this park up, is it going to be programmed, or is it just always going to be open? And different funding sources will not allow you to use their money if you're going to close that off for certain things. It's got to be open to all, for example, or maybe it's not. And so we want to make sure we understand kind of how all these pieces fit together. It won't be an absolute perfect plan. It's a master plan, and we can't get caught up in all the little tiny details, but we want to just gather as much as we can together. And again, I just, honestly, it's a feeling of this community, and what it means to you is really important in a park. So with that, any questions?
I have several questions.
Shoot.
Talking about the master plan, we already have invested a lot of money in these beautiful drawings. We know what Kevin Freeman wants. He has to have this. We know somebody else that absolutely has to have a splash pad, a wading pool. I mean, emotions come into this, and we talked about then going to these events and having a blank slate and let people kind of put things where they think would be best. That's not their job. That's your job, right? Trying to incorporate.
Well, we want to take in their thoughts, what's important priority.
Yeah, I understand
And
that.
then we want to put it, for example, I would not put the good example, splash pad needs to be within 100 feet of a restroom, for example. The playground can be a little further, but the splash pad by code requirement has to be that. So if they say it's on this side of the park, we're going to keep you in bounds to make sure we don't put it too far away, as an example.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
what I'm saying,
Yep.
Ken, is that
Yep.
we can get input, and we can have this
Yep.
beautiful board, and people put in things everywhere, but I think it's most important to identify what people really want. And I attended our summer sessions last year. Some of them were a few pretty good ideas, some of them just weren't gonna fly.
Yep.
I mean, it just isn't gonna happen, like a roof over the playground or something like that.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to figure out how we balance getting everybody's input with what we've already done, what you've done, and make sure that we take into consideration the things that are really important. Like pickleball courts, obviously, right now are hot, but I don't know if people at the picnic, or I mean at the fair, at the farmer's market, are we gonna get the people that are pickleball players there? And so I'm wondering, how do we get input from more people rather than just the people at the farmer's market to incorporate it into our master plan? I guess, so.
So some of that can be a social media outreach, you know, I mean, and a lot of this, by presenting it at a farmer's market, there's a huge word of mouth that will get out there. And once the pickleball community knows, for example, I almost guarantee they will go, oh, I want to see.
Okay.
Because the community as a whole, I'll just say Spokane regionally, including Coeur d'Alene, if you talk to a pickleball group, it's underserved in comparison. So, I'm not saying that's the cat's meow and the right answer, but the last thing we want to do, again, this is kind of collectively, the community as a whole. If it's strong to them, they need to come, obviously. But as you as the commission and making those decisions, we're going to throw as many spitwads on the wall, if you will, but we're going to keep the ones that are important. And we've got to make that decision. And that's what your body is. I'm looking towards you with my guidance in respects to, okay, well, if we're going to keep this, it might affect that. But that's what we need, is that leadership of where that's at. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to develop a park plan that 95% are happy with. We won't get everybody, I guarantee it. But then you need to feel comfortable and submit it to city council, because city council will need to adopt that park plan and that process before they even consider any funding, unless it's just donations. So that's why it's really important.
And I'll speak to that just a little bit, Jay. As I said, and I stand by it, no one comes out unless they're mad. And so, you know, I will advertise. So we've started using social media, which I am seeing some response to, which is good. I had some folks show up at the city cleanup day that said they heard about it through social media. So these meetings will be, or these farmers markets will be noticed as special meetings for input on the park plan. So we will put that out over social media. We'll notice it like we normally do. But I mean, there's really only so much you can do, and the will of the people to find a way to make a comment, you'll probably be underwhelmed by it. With regard to the boards that we were talking about, my experience has been just allowing people to put their hands on something. So one of the ideas that I talked to Ken about, you can see at the top of these boards and the little blocks, they have some different amenities that you might find in a park. Even so much as just having a list of those, or, you know, pictures, and allowing people to put a sticker by what they like. If you can get people to actually participate, even if it's as silly as just putting a sticker, then you get a lot of more traffic around your booth and that sort of thing. So once your recommendation is made to the city council and they decide to go ahead with it, then it will come back to this commission for the public hearing process, and you'll go through that whole thing again. But I think that using the farmer's market in this way, although I agree with you, you're getting a certain demographic there, but I think we'll get more input than we would if we just normally publicized an open house here at City Hall. People just don't come, so.
Thank you.
Nick?
Okay, well, I for one am excited. We've been trudging through this for a long time. What a fun thing to do. In regards to grants, as a organization who is grant dependent, what I have found is that grants lead to other grants, and when you get one funder, that leads to two, which then leads to four, because people want to be part of something. They just want to know that they're not the whole funding source.
Yep.
So, I mean, it'll happen. Anything they do with kids and dogs, there is a boatload of grants. What has more to do with kids than a park? I'm excited. One place maybe to advertise this would be the first Friday. Are they still doing first Fridays at Bottles? First Thursday,
I
whatever
think,
it is.
yeah.
Okay.
That is a good idea.
You know, at least just, hey, come out and tell us what you want in the park type thing.
Yeah, I think there's a few areas around town where we do have some good momentum
Okay.
building
Okay.
that we can reach out to and,
Okay. Couple things that weren't mentioned that we need to think about as we go forward is, okay, just FYI, for you that don't know, I live across the street from the park. I know how much usage it gets, okay? One of the reasons I moved to Millwood was because of the park and my grandkids. But something to keep in mind when we're picking, and when we're talking about his materials that he wants to use and things like that, is upkeep and maintenance. You know, we do get a little thing in this area called winter. Okay, so is the winter time gonna destroy the materials or things like that? Just something to think about, and they're a professional, and they'll have all those cool, hot, new materials that will withstand our weather that we get here. But, I'm excited, and just a couple ideas that, for themes, if there's somehow we can incorporate the paper mill into it, and if there's somehow we can incorporate the UP into it, I think those are two things that are, in some way we can incorporate the whistle into it. Those are three things that say
That's a good
Millwood
idea.
Millwood every day.
What was the second thing you said?
The UP,
Union Pacific.
the railroad, the railroad, just
Run by twice an hour.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, those are three things that, I mean, say Millwood all day long, so.
Yes.
Anyway, but I'm excited, so I'm happy that you've got it sounds like he's got a wealth of experience and.
Yes, and he also has said that he can be available, not just, maybe not every farmer's market, but maybe a couple of them to be with us to answer questions from people who come by. And again, when you mentioned the maintenance, we'll have Daniel, also, who does most of our park maintenance right now. So, yeah, I think we've got a lot of good resources, and I feel a little, I don't know, synergy building in Millwood lately. It seems like with Bottles, and I get lots of comments from people outside of Millwood about Joe's house, and it feels like maybe we're
Cool.
got a little synergy, so.
And then the best thing I heard you say was, money's no object. So we got a blank
Just
slate.
spend to your heart's
And
content.
I can do that.
So,
It's a man's dream also. Okay, I'm a shopper.
It's just about the priority.
yeah,
Well, I'm excited about it as well. I guess 35 years in the corporate business and sitting through so many strategic planning meetings about what our 3-year plan is and 5-year plan. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on this, but I just, you know, we talk about one thing about getting input from everybody, and yet we're already going to propose some other options. So a little confusing there, but
Yeah.
I'm excited about it as well. So, yeah, Ken's help, I'm sure that, and Christina's involvement, that won't be impacted the way that some of my corporate strategic plans were impacted, so, okay.
oh, I think that in getting people's input, what happened last summer in our meetings in the park was that we had several people come over and sit and listen, but they didn't really want to talk. So don't put down the little stickers. Those can be huge. Somebody will go over and wander through and put stickers because they don't have to get on a microphone and address people.
Yes, that's
Yeah, I
exactly it.
think that is a
Yep.
good point. We did have
Yep.
quite a few of those, and I'm a big fan of the stickers. That's how we came up with our historic lighting that's supposed to go in with the argon widening. You know, you provide 15 different options, but only give people 5 stickers, and they have to determine, you know, you can really cull some good information from that. So, yeah, that's definitely one that we're gonna utilize maybe more than once, so. Yeah.
They seem simple, kind of silly sometimes, but that's exactly it. I mean, the intent here is to just try to get people to involve, and then, at minimum, just having an image that they can look at, you get comments back. I mean, that's but if you just went out and asked somebody a question, it will go random on you.
Well, and also too, with our meetings last year, you weren't there, but we were asking people to speak into a mic. When someone just wanders up to your booth and can kind of chat with you, you might also kind of pull from some of those folks who wouldn't otherwise want to speak into the mic. Unlike myself, who can't wait to turn my mic on.
Any other questions or comments for Ken? Okay, great presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank
and
you
your
for
work
being
there.
here.
So, that brings us to the staff report.
Okay, I have a few things. First of all, congratulations, Commissioner Ankeny, on your appointment.
Thank you.
As chair of the commission. He's not here. I'm sure he's not watching. I hope he has better things to do than that. But I just do want to say a few things about Commissioner Stravens. He was on our commission for a long time. And I just want to express my appreciation for him. I feel like I'm far enough out that I can say this without it being a thing. I think that my involvement with this commission got off to a bit of a rocky start. And it was because he was willing to sit down with me before each meeting, to talk to me about the items that were coming forward, to strategize a little bit with me. I feel like we're now in a really good place. And I put in work on that. I know that you all did as well, learning how to work with me, but he really did do the lion's share of helping me to become successful working with you. So I'm excited for him to be on the council. I think he'll do a good job there. He's got good history, obviously, with all the things that he's gone through with this commission, and I think he's going to be great. So I thought his letter was very nice. He asked me to pass that on to you all, and so wish him well. We will miss him at these meetings.
Do we know how many years? Okay, so I know I've been on the commission 8 years, and he was the chairman when I came on board. And Bobby, I know you've been, I just was curious. Did he do 3 terms?
I don't know.
Most of us finished off a term,
Okay.
and plus he did 2 full ones.
Yeah, he did
Well,
2
he didn't quite finish the last one, so I don't know. We'd have to look at the record.
Yeah, I probably could figure it out, but I think it's been more than a decade. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
he's put in,
Yeah, I'd
Quite a bit of
throw out
time.
there 11 years, but I really don't know.
yeah. So I do appreciate Kelly. So the only other thing I really wanted to talk to you about was the city cleanup day we had, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. We had, I think we had about 15 volunteers, and then on top of that, probably another 10 staff and their families. I made my kids get out there and pick up some garbage. We didn't have a good turnout of our electeds and appointeds, which was disappointing. So all I just would like to say is, you know, we all have lives, I know that, and I don't expect you all to attend everything that we do. This particular event was 3 hours. Even if you could come for part of it, it would be really great if we could have some participation. So I'm telling you that now in advance of Millwood Days in August 27th. Maybe mark it on your calendar. No, it's just one day. So, yeah, you know, you did. Consider yourselves scolded.
Did you come?
Look at her. So, I was, as you know, supposed to be going to Little Rock that day. My flight got canceled. And I thought to myself, they wouldn't know if I didn't go. But I came. I came, we got about 20 full garbage bags of trash. Just picked up, you know, it was just kind of random around the city where people wandered to. We got the trail really good. We got Argonne in front of the mill really good. That was a lot of pickup. So yeah, about 20 bags. of garbage, which I thought was pretty good and fairly good, turnout for our first time. So we hope to build on that going forward, probably just once a year. I mean, you can only expect people to show up to pick up garbage so often before they don't want to do that anymore. So
What's the date of Millwood Days again then?
August 27th.
Okay, I got it.
And again, I think however long the booth is there, Mike, you came out and helped me one year with it. If we can even just, get a couple hours out of a couple of folks, that would be great. Other than that, I did end up making it to Little Rock. I went to a conference down there. It wasn't the best one I'd ever been to, but I made it there and back, so that's all right. And so now with the passage of this zoning code update, I'm feeling like I can come up for some breath and maybe start looking at some other stuff. So I don't have any projects to report on at this time, and other than I can answer questions that you might have, so.
Any questions for Christina? So I want to talk about Kelly just a few minutes. I thought he did a great job here. He did. I'm hoping that by your guys putting your faith in me that I can do just half the job that he did. So I'm looking forward to that. Christina, just once again, thank you for all your hard work on this. The three of us had been on it over a year. Bobby, we'd been on this, it seems like, for the last 5 years. And Commissioner Wu, thank you for your help on it here at the end. I mean, hey, it's invaluable. As Ken said, I mean, hey, we're all making a fortune here, I mean, so it's yeoman's work. So I'm looking really, like I said, I'm really excited about the park plan, especially since I've got young grandkids that are more than willing to give me some input on what they think should be in the park. So, no, that's all the only comments I got, so. Anybody else?
My only comment was, great job that Christina has done on this and everything else, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I do, once again, on the record, appreciate your attention to detail. It is maddening to be on this side of it, but I know how important it is, and I do appreciate you, so I want you to know that.
I feel like with all of us, we came up with a good quality product.
I agree.
Because we all work together as a team.
I'm glad it's over.
Absolutely.
On to the next.
Okay. So, our next meeting, I guess, is June 22nd at the Farmers Market?
Yes, so what I would hope to do between now and then, if you leave your packets here tonight, unless for some reason you feel like you need to take them, what I would like to do is put together the printouts of these renderings and the comments that we got from them, possibly more information from Ken, anything that I can pull together to send out to you a week or so in advance of that farmer's market so that you can see everything that we've got going forward. And then, yes, we'll just plan on meeting at the farmer's market. Like I said, I will be there when it opens at 3, and it goes from 3 to 7, so y'all can show up when you're able, and we'll go from there.
All right. So Christina, don't hesitate to shoot me an email to help guide me along the path a little bit here.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll chat with you after the meeting
Okay,
about.
perfect. Okay, great, thank you. So if nobody has anything else, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Whoa!
I got the hammer.
Good job, Mike.
Exciting for you.